Good evening, everybody, and welcome to my hello, and welcome to this rather not hastily done presentation because I did most of it. Well, I've been doing most of it for the last 4 months, if I'm honest. But it's all to do with FT8 and how operating FT8 helped understand my propagation, which isn't the title I was going to give this presentation, but it's the title that Nigel gave it, because the real presentation title is FT8, FT4 and Whisper as tools for real-time propagation experimentation. So it's I know that some people here are a little bit miffed about this thing that we call FT8, and in fact they say FT8 and FT4 is plastic radio.
Outrageous.
Well, I'd like to tell certain people, Adam, that this is fundamentally not true. Using the QSO tool, it's not that much difference to contesting. However, I'm not here to convince you to play FT8 or FT4 for QSOs. This is purely to talk about their application in understanding propagation of your own station. And that's what it's really helped me do here. So, I'm going to talk about briefly content, me getting into amateur radio, my shack, SSB, accidentally getting to FT4, FT8, talking about propagation reporting with FT4 and FT8, and using Whisper, which you may not have heard of. Some of you may have, but you may not have heard or even tried Whisper, and some conclusions, and there'll be chance for questions at the end. I did make a conscious decision to make this presentation about an hour long, because I think that's long enough for anyone. So, about me. Hello, I'm Steve. I've been in the society for not a very long time, but I did get interested in radio as a teenager. I must have been 13 when a childhood friend got me involved with the West Bromwich Amateur Radio Society, because I am from the Midlands originally. And I even got to do the night classes. I was even taking night classes for my RE. However, when you're 13 years old, it's not very easy to comprehend evidence theorem. I mean, Ohm's law you can just about manage, but stuff like that, it's a bit advanced for a 13-year-old. I'm not frightened of. Now I've got a degree in physics and a master's degree in engineering, which means I can just about handle the science now. And I recently thought that amateur radio was more accessible. I think this was partly due to the fact that I think the foundation is quite an easy exam. It is possible to do it just going through questions and just repeating them. I also think that the abolition of the practical tests has made it more accessible. I'm not going to argue whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's not for me to talk about. I know there are other people in the society who have views on this. But I did pass my foundation exam in August 2022. And I got my foundation call sign, and I passed my intermediate in November 2022. My current call sign is 2E0SUG. I do plan on doing my full. However, real life has kind of got in the way of that, of me doing that at the moment. I can see the advantages of doing that, but it's going to have to wait a little while, and it's not going to stop me from doing what I'm doing now. So, first of all, the shack. So, my original shack was a bow thing. In fact, it was probably one of these two bow things, because I've got two. V5R. And Mike gets rid of all the microphone issues. And the tactical whip antenna, which I've got off Amazon. It's a 3D printed a base for it. This is actually from Beaches on the Air in Carbish Bay and St Ives last year, which was a lot of fun. But we had one QSO, and it was a guy from Wigan on holiday. Yeah, absolutely. So more seriously, the Shack 2.0, or where I am now, and it's all based around an ICOM 7100. I've got an antenna, LDG Z100 plus antenna tuner, zero CBO Mag 1 Magitenna, and a Xiaomi HLP 270. So there's the radio. For those who can't see, there's the radio. Make it easier for Tom. It's actually just above the antenna tuner, because the radio is actually on that table there. I'm pointing at it right now. The head is here, so I can actually operate by my computer. Just in there is the Magitena. You can't see the onion, but the onion for the Magitena is right there. And for reference, that's about where the radio is. So it's right next to the radio, and that's on the other side of the room. And there's my 2E0SUG antenna, which took me ages to get fixed because I can't attach to cables. But that's another story. I've got some limitations here, which some of you may not. I live in a terraced house, so there's not much space for external antennas. In Stockport, when it comes to terraced houses, you aren't allowed antennas at the front. They like them at the back. There's one house which is quite close to me, and there's a big collinear, but it's at the back of the house. So although you can see it from certain angles, you can't see it from the front. I've also got a telephone line to the rear of the house, which make it a bit of a problem, which is why I've gone with an antenna with the eaves. So there's a lot of noise from the house itself. That's can be problematic. So as a result, I've been there's no grounding point. So I have been experimenting with a counterpoise. My counterpoise actually goes along this wall and over there somewhere, which has improved things slightly. Of course, I've done an EMC assessment because it's just over there, and there's no concerns for HF. There's some power reduction for VHF, UHF when someone else is in the house, but that's only if they're standing in the area just outside the toilet downstairs. So, how's this affected single sideband? Well, I can hear America, Eastern Europe, very easily. Although because the antenna's on the west side of the house, that side, further east is a bit problematic. I have managed to get a QSO and a single sideband QSO with Bulgaria though, twice. So not even a couple of weeks ago. He was on a couple of weeks ago. Stations have more of a problem hearing me. There's lots of different reasons as to why they have a problem hearing me. And with the current setup I have, I can only be heard in Europe. Part of this is where the antenna is, the layout of the antenna. But there's another thing, and that's much louder local stations. There's a 2E0 up the road in Gorton, which I don't know, I can't remember his call sign and the name of him. He's Neil knows him, and he's got 4 outside antennas and about 7 radios, and he is significantly louder than me. So my 50 watts doesn't mean that much on that. And as I say, I've got a lot of noise with the noise problem, especially at the start, was really bad. And it gets worse as the day goes on. So actually during the day, it's not so bad. From about 6 o'clock is when it starts to get really bad. So I've got some future plans to evict that, which I'm just going to include. I've got to modify my Magitena setup. This was advice from Bill. Thank you, Bill. I'm getting a 6-meter folded dipole diplexer system, also to hide in the eaves. This is so I can get signals on 6. I am getting some, but not many. I'm going to get a second Magitena and outside my drain pipe. So that's my first external. I'm thinking about a collinear to sit on the end of the eaves, which I can just about do. And there's even room for a potential tower on the other side of the shed. Now, this was all going swimmingly, and then I got ill. I got a bug, and I couldn't speak. Not being able to speak when you're trying to do single sideband is a problem. And when you're trying to do a presentation, it's also a problem. So, I started looking into digital modes, and when I was looking into digital modes, I was looking into RTTY and I was looking into PSK, and there's not a lot of information as I can find to help you into these parts of the hobby. And this is something I know that Evans said about, let's have a go at getting a few of us into RITI and PSK and stuff like that, but there's not actually a lot of information. But what there is a lot of information of is FT8. So that's what I did. I started into FT8. Now, for those of you who don't like plastic radio, I'm now going to tell you a little bit about it. It was invented by Joe Taylor and Steve Frank in 2017. They also created the main software for it, WSJTX. It has a decoding threshold of -24 dB, so it's quite sensitive. Along with FT4, these are the go-to modes right now for digital. But I have memory issues on my iMac, so I actually run a derivative program called JTDX, which I think is a little bit tidier. This is how a QSO works. It's exactly the same as you think it is for single sideband. You give a CQ, call sign, and then your 4-digit maiden head square. And someone gives your call sign, their call sign, and their 4-digit maiden head square. Then you give your call sign, their call sign, and you give them a signal report. Then they give their call sign, your call sign, and their signal report. And then you say, thank you very much. So, this is an example of a QSO. So here's me calling CQ, and oh, look, it's John. John's answered me. Oh, that's nice. So I give John a signal report. John gives me a signal report. I say thank you to John, and John says thank you to me. And I can do this because we've got 2 QSOs between us, once on the 18th of January and once on the 22nd of January. So, a few other things about FT8. Each message lasts 15 seconds long in 1 of 2 time slots. So there are 4 time slots per minute. So there's an A time slot and a B time slot. You can only operate in one of the time slots, and you can only listen to the other time slot. Each message uses, because it's only one frequency, you use a 50 hertz audio slot. So you need that. You need 50 hertz to actually send the information that you're sending, and to receive the information, it needs to be in separate 50 hertz audio slots. A QSO takes a minimum of 90 seconds. However, some do take a lot longer. After completing the QSO, the operator must restart the process. It cannot run continuously. This is really important to understand. That as much as you say it's plastic radio, there is actually quite a lot of human interaction, because it's the human that chooses who they want to contact. It's, in a lot of cases, the computer can do that when it's answering CQ calls, but it's the human that actually operates that. And when you've finished it, the human has to restart it. There is another mode called Fox and Hound, which is where you pick a target and you can repeatedly, I think it's 10 or 15 times, you can try and initiate the QSO with that station. However, you cannot complete a QSO in Fox and Hound mode because it does not let you. There is a human element to that. You must turn off Fox and Hound mode to get that to work. Well, it's certainly JTDX, and this is JTDX. This is the screen as it is, which has got a cleaner interface than WSJTX, in a lot of people's opinion. The left-hand side is live receiving. The right-hand side of the controls. There's an additional waterfall window, which looks like this. And that waterfall window is really useful because then you get to see the audio, the chunks of audio that have been used on that frequency. You can see them as little squiggly lines getting brighter and darker. Anyway, you can control the rig power directly from the slider on the top right, which is really useful. My 7100 is obviously set to a maximum of 50 watts, but it knows that, and it can talk to that, and it can give you as much or as little power as you want. And it can also do FT4, JT65, JT9, T10, and Whisper. So it's a nice little piece of software. Going on to FT4, because I have mentioned it, it's a bit different. It's half the length of an FT8 message. So that means there are 8 time slots per minute. The message uses a larger audio bandwidth, and it's a much faster and much more economical, rapid approach to QSOs. It's kind of the machine gun approach to getting a QSO. Not many stations play FT4, as I found. There are a lot, but there's not many. Also, you find that there's some people that will play FT4 instead of playing FT8, which is interesting. Anyway, I'm going to outfact some of the myths about the difference between FT8 and some of the other modes that we've seen today. And the biggest one, the closest thing to this kind of QSO is contesting. Whether you like it or not, contesting is the closest. It's just similar data passed between 2 operators. It is, however, more competitive. You've got limited audio bandwidth of about 2,500 hertz. It means that there's only like 50 people per actual, whether it's in A or B. So there's only 100 people in total, really, that can be on it at any one time. As a result, there's always an inability to hear messages in your message cycle. I know that this is, again, a problem which you get playing single sideband, because you're transmitting, you can't hear anyone else. There are a lot of times that you see operators after a specific de-expedition station, and they use Fox and Hound, and they block up the audio bandwidth. I do remember a Sunday morning about 2 months ago. It might even have been a month ago. I don't know if John was up in time to catch some of this, but there was a rare station. I think it was somewhere in the Pacific, and everyone was trying to get this station. Everyone, to the extent that in one of the time slot was the station, and on the other time slot was everybody else. And they were all just hounding just to get this one station. No one else was using the other time slot. Something that happens a lot is being gazumped. That's when you get a stronger station using the same audio block, so you can't be heard. And the most annoying thing about being gazumped is you don't know, because you can't hear yourself. I tend to operate in the margins. I tend to operate either at 500 or around 2,500 hertz. And having that tends to give you a little bit of leeway, and you tend to be heard a little better. The prime frequency is 1,500 hertz, and if you're playing around the centre, it's very often there's a stronger station will just broadcast straight over you. I've had 990 QSOs playing with this. 990. I was actually going to do a little montage of some QSL cards from EQSL, but there's a lot of personal data on there, and to be honest, you get fed up of all the Italian and Russian stations. There are a lot of Italian and Russian stations that play FT8 and FT4 to the extent that they can become annoying. When you're trying to get QSO with one person, you do something else. But it does lead to some questions. So, how is it I can hear them, but they can't hear me? I ask this a lot, and this is the same. It's the same way playing single sideband is digital. There are people that I can hear, but they can't hear me. Well, some of that is the noise. Some of that is my power limit. I don't understand how good my antenna is. I don't know what power that they're using either. So, how far am I actually being heard? Well, the only normal method is through a QSO exchange, and that's not easy to get someone to go out of their way to do a QSO exchange from you in Australia when you can't hear them. And it's not very immediate. It takes time, even to update Logbook of the World or Club Log or QRZ.com. There's a lot of time taken for the QSO to actually go through. So the third thing is how it's a propagation affecting my transmissions. And this is something that interested me a little bit more as a scientist, because that's basically what I do for a living. And I don't know. I suspect there's some skips, but I can't prove it. So you need to have ways of proving it. And this is where we come on to the sciencey bit. Propagation reporting using FT8 and FT4. So I use a software called Grid Tracker. This is a companion to 2E0SUG and JTDX. Don't know if John recognises it. Yeah, John recognises it. I thought as much. All the pros use this. It is really good. It plugs directly into the software, and it can do all the logging for you. It's got its own log, and it can do all of that for you. WSJTX and JTDX can log directly. This can also log directly. But this plugs into Logbook of the World, Club Log, QSN, EQSL. It plugs into quite a lot of different things, so you can do that automatically. It will even plug into an M1 server, so it's really good for that. It can get data from PSK Reporter, for those people who know what that is yet, and it can get live data from other Grid Tracker users. It can operate certain functions directly with WSJTX and JTDX. In this window here, this is the call roster window. And you can actually click on a call sign when it comes up, and it gives you a lot more information, presents it in a lot more human way. But you can actually click on those call signs, and you can start an attempt to contact that particular station from Grid Tracker. And it can show live trends as to where QSOs are happening, which is really useful. It will show you where the QSOs are happening, and also live trends as to how busy the bands are. That's really useful. And for the best thing of all, Evan, it's free. Like everything else I'm talking about tonight, it's all free. So this is the window. This is the main Grid Tracker window. At the top right-hand corner of the screen, you'll see that there's some bars. Right? Bars just underneath where it says receive. Red bars indicate how busy the bands are. I think they're actually indicating QSO spot reports as well. I think they're spot reports. The blue bands are actual QSOs, if I remember right. That's a useful reference if you need to switch between bands, or if you want to switch between bands. You can just look at that and just say, oh, the action's on 20. Change to 20 meters. So, as I say, nice map of the world, and you can see my location is right in the centre in Great Britain, and you can see some other information presented to you on the screen. And I'm going to explain what some of that is now. Well, in a moment. This is actually how I operate FT8 and FT4, so I can see everything. I'm an iMac user, as you can tell with the apple in the corner, and this is how I operate, and I can see everything that I need to see. Sometimes I don't use the call roster window. Sometimes I can be watching a YouTube video in that. It's you can do quite a lot with the space anyway. So, instant spot reports. Who can hear me right now? This is an instant propagation report from 7:30 AM on 30 meters. Okay, and you can see skip patterns appearing, or to make it a little bit easier for people, there they are. So you can actually see how the signal is being propagated, which I'm a little bit of an aside right now. My first experience on a HF rig ever since I was a kid was doing the club net, 10 meter net on a Sunday, in the club radio with Evan. And when I did that, I had a discussion with Evan. Evan was trying to discuss propagation. Evan was trying to discuss how the propagation changes over time. This is a much more realistic way of understanding that propagation. This is a much more visual way of understanding that propagation. And you don't have to have a science mind to understand, oh, I can get on this particular one, I can get to the west coast of America. I can get to all of Eastern Europe at this particular time in the morning. So you don't need to be. It's a lot less. It's not. It's. I wouldn't say it was for the hard of thinking. That's wrong. It's just a lot more visual representation of the data that you're getting from doing that. There are some limitations with Grid Tracker. Not everyone's listening, because those are live reports from Grid Tracker itself. So not everyone listens to when they've got Grid Tracker on, and not everyone that's listening is reporting. There are some people who tell some little fibs about what they're listening to. Where there's no internet, reporting is impossible, and I do mean impossible. And as a result, forget Africa, most of Asiatic Russia, and parts of South America. However, and I say that, a few weeks ago, I had a station report that they heard me in Antarctica, which is pretty interesting for one point. But even so, it's how they've got internet, I don't know, but they managed to report it. So this is PSK Reporter. Now, you've probably seen PSK Reporter if you use some of the other modes as well. I find this really, really clunky. I don't find it useful at all. But you can get... It doesn't like updates. That's the other thing. If you update it too often, it says, you're updating too much. We don't like this. And it can throw a hissy fit at you. So, fortunately, it's all built into Grid Tracker. So you've got extra reporting. So it's not just the live reports from Grid Tracker itself. You've got PSK reports, which can be input live as well. So let's assess my station's performance. This is on 10 meters. The boxes are the stations that I can hear. The red ones specifically are ones I think, if I remember right, they're the ones that are in the middle of a QSO with someone. The yellow ones are people who are requesting, they're calling out CQ. The dots on there are stations that can hear me. These are ones that have been reported. So there's quite a few stations which are reporting, but they're not actually transmitting. But there's definite zones where I'm getting to indicate the propagation. And this is really indicative of what I get on 10 meters. I don't get really anything in close to us Europe. It's all Mediterranean, it's all Eastern Europe. So it's very useful just as a visual tool, because you can pick out that. You don't need me to add the line to it, but you can pick out where your station is getting those particular results. And obviously this is going to depend on the area that you are. So a bit about Whisper. Whisper is something I've recently got into. Whisper is a weak signal propagation reporter, which is how JTDF does Whisper, because it's included in the software. They're one-way signals. You don't get a QSO from playing Whisper. They're low power. I use 1 watt because that's the lowest amount that my radio will actually show in Whisper. However, there are people that use fractions of a watt. They are 2-minute signals, and they have a lower decoding threshold of minus 28 dB. They're not constant, so you can see there it says TX%, 20%. So that's 20% of the per hour it will be transmitting. And Whisper also produces some nice plots. This was a 10-meter Whisper, 6 hours it was, in an evening, a Thursday evening about 3 weeks ago. And again, you can see propagation trends. You can still see, again on 10, that Mediterranean band. You can see some of the west coast, but you can see a bit further because it's doing some other things on that particular night. And this is why I think Whisper is dead useful for setting up a station for contesting. You can have this running. I mean, I think we've all got as part of our license unattended operation. It can be questionable, but even if you're in attendance and you're doing something else, you can have Whisper quietly doing something in the background while you set up, and you can get a plot of everything and all the data that you'll get, because you actually get data that you can put into a spreadsheet, and all of the data that you get does mean that you come up. Oh well, it's open to so and so then, and it's open to so and so then, or it's closed to so and so then, on that particular band, or you can do it with other bands. There's no reason why you have to play Whisper all the time on one band. It's a really good way of assessing what your station is doing, because there's always people listening. So that's really useful. But this helps answer some of the questions that I've had earlier. How is it I can hear them but they can't hear me? Well, a lot of that is my noise floor. I haven't really gone into it too much, but my noise floor, after reconfiguration, it's S34 on 10 meters. But on top band at night, it can be S9. And there's anti-aliasing limitations for the eaves. How far am I actually being heard? Well, everywhere. East-west, with a bit of a blind spot in Africa, but I think that's because it's Africa. It's very band dependent, though, as can be demonstrated with my first hop to Eastern Europe on 10 and the Mediterranean Sea. How is the propagation affecting my transmissions? Well, again, here is another 10-meter window. This is just a plot of all the stations that I was hearing at the time. And these are actually the countries that you can hear that I had QSOs with at the time. On this particular band, I think it was 10 meters. It was 10 meters, thank you. I've had some more QSOs since then, so it's a little bit different now. But you can see bands, areas where I'm getting interesting skip patterns appearing. Maybe not so much these two. There may be just effects because there's a lot of ocean between us and America and us in the Azores. But certainly that's interesting information if you are trying to target specific stations, because then you can turn around and say, well, I doubt if I'm going to get Cairo. I can turn around and say, I doubt if I'm going to get Cairo. So I doubt if I'm going to get Cape Town on 10 meters. And it is unlikely. I was in the middle of a QSO with Cape Town yesterday, though. It was a guy in Cape Town. Or was it Joburg? It was one or the other, I can't remember. Which never completed. Again, this is one of the issues being gazumped. So, I've got some conclusions which I hope are useful for you. First of all, there's a lot of validity in these modes in understanding the propagation and sensitivity in your station. I do want to make it clear, and I didn't really make this clear at the start. I'm quite into SSB. I quite like talking to people. Just like my rig's here, mic's here. I quite like it. To help understand how my station is reacting, this is a lot of valued information. And if you've got limited transmission facilities, as I have, one aerial, it gives you even more information. The QSOs are just a bonus. I know there's 990 of them, but they are just a bonus. I'm not really... The QSOs, they help you do other things. But the key thing is that software opens the door to Whisper, and Whisper really is useful. Even FT8 and FT4, they're really useful if you're setting up a special station for contesting. And it might be something to consider. And bearing in mind, you probably know all there is to know about everything, how it comes out of Common Barn Farm when you've got the contesting group up there. But there's probably some things that you don't know, and there might be some anomalies. But just running these modes for a couple of hours, you might find out something different. You might say, oh, let's target this area on this band and see if we can get something. The other thing it's good for is the club ladder. The club ladder is really useful. This data plugged into the club ladder is a really good mark of where people are, how people are doing, and why people are doing better than others. Now, John and myself there, I know we play it a lot. We're fairly close. This is from today, by the way. This is fairly close at the top of the club ladder. But it's interesting that literally of the QSOs we've got, they're virtually identical. I've got more than 10, but they are virtually identical. The only reason Pete's got more, Pete's got access to another band, but he's also got better facility. He's in a different location, so his skip pattern will be different to other people. But it's really useful for understanding the weaknesses of yours, the benefit, the bonuses, and the weaknesses of your station. And you, as I say, you can still get other things out of it. So I got my first digital WXPX digital award literally a few days ago. So on that, are there any questions?
Go on, Evan, lead the way.
I've got some comments. Yeah.
Feel free.
What type of plastic is it?
Teflon.
Right. It's not a QSO party, it's a Tupperware party, isn't it? Look, just a couple of things. I think, I mean, I've said it a number of times before. I think, I mean, just on talking about what you're saying about how it indicates propagation, I think when people use a lot of power with these modes, it does distort what the conditions actually are. Because what these modes actually do is that you can actually get contacts through scatter rather than skip if you use like 100 watts or something like that. You know, normally to do that you'd have, you know, with CW or something like that, you'd have to have a 10 element Yagi or something like that with a kilowatt. Because with normal modes, the skip is where a lot of the power is refracted back down to the ground station, whereas the scatter is only a little bit of it. So this is one, I think, with regard to looking at the propagation readings. You know how you've got with FT8 you've got the list of the signal to noise ratio of the station that's received you. I'd be suspicious of ones which are very, very low, and certainly if the transmitting station is Italian or Russian or something like that, they're probably using a lot of power. I mean, there are programs. I think PSK Reporter does it. Is that you can limit the signal to noise ratio to, say, the minimum being -6 dB or something like that. So therefore you get, if you want to use something like CW or SSB, that is probably a more likely indication that a skip path is open. Whereas if you get a lot of stuff which is negative 27 and 24 and stuff like that, it's a bit, could be a bit misleading. So I think I guess my, not complaint really, my comment on FT8 and things like that, they're a bit too good. And I think certainly for SSB, just on terms of contesting, if you do SSB where you don't have the reverse beacon network available to you, well, you do, but you know, people aren't using it because it's SSB, it's not CW, it's not automated. You're not really going to know the conditions as well as you would, say, in a CW or RTTY contest, where you'll have a lot of information from the reverse beacon network. Certainly for CW, not as much so for RTTY. So it is useful in that, and I think it's judging it is. I mean, those maps are very useful. I think it's experience, isn't it? Knowing which ones are anomalous, maybe a little bit too close. That maybe is some scatter as opposed to skip, and therefore, you know, if you're getting all these sort of contacts in southern Europe and Israel or whatever on 10 meters, but you get a freak one in Berlin, chances are that 10 meters isn't going to be open to Berlin. You know, it's just too close, even though it's showing up. So I guess that's just experience. But yeah, I think the graphic stuff is a really good way to understand HF propagation. Because I think you explain it to people and they just don't get it really. I mean, the whole point is, certainly on a band like 10 meters, is getting a really good result, is getting something reasonably close in, not far away. And I think that sort of throws people off and they just don't really get it. Whereas I think showing that map does sort of, showing the different bands across the world, you know, showing there's obviously first skip, second skip, third skip or whatever, is really quite useful. Anyway, Or just one quick thing. Just the stuff about being gazumped. I think that's where the PSK reporter could be useful. If you suddenly start finding that you're not getting anywhere, you're not turning up on the PSK reporter, even to areas where you're expecting to show up, that probably means someone's on your frequency. Anyway, I'll shut up.
No. Valid comments there, Evan. Valid. As far as FT4 and FT8, I think you're absolutely spot on. Part of the annoyance with the Italian and the Russian stations is that they are using stupid amounts of power in these low power modes. From the actual listening to actual hearing hearing these stations and getting the QSOs from these stations, I think it's good to get a trend. And as I say, that particular 1 on 10, that gives a good trend as to where I'm hearing stations from and they're hearing me. But it's the reports, so it's those lines with the dots on the end. You can't fake that. Those are the things that are much more important to me, because you get to see very much. You get to see real trends, because these are stations who can only hear you. I think there is a lot of truth when it comes to scatter. That's probably why you get some scatter. I think it's probably true when it comes to the ones in the Atlantic. And on that 10-meter plot, there was one in Prague. It must have been a good day in Prague, because Prague is the only one which isn't really in that band, which I was showing on.
It's sporadic here, something like that, which is a good indication of that potentially.
Could be.
If it's more than one.
The only thing I see, and that's on 6 meters where I use it, you get a lot of one-off decodes. So somebody calls CQ, and then there's a bit of meteor scatter just long enough for it to decode. And then you got that spot there, that flag or whatever you call it. But there's not really propagation in there, so you have to. It would be good if there was an option somehow you need to have at least 3 or 4 decodes of that station before it shows on the map. That would be helpful, I think.
Another valid point there, Carsten. One thing I will say on 6, I mean, I can hear virtually nothing on 6. I mean, yesterday when I had it on 6 meters, I could hear a bit of Northern Ireland. Someone in Northern Ireland calling CQ a bit, someone in Scotland calling CQ a bit. They couldn't hear me because my major tenor, although it says it's designed to be run at 6, the SWR is awful. It's 6. You can't get a low SWR on that. It's dreadful. Just going back to what Evan was saying though, Whisper is probably a better indication for how things are working, because Whisper, it's a gentleman's agreement to use low power, and it genuinely is low power. As I say, I use 1 watt. Then there are people who use much lower power than me. But the key thing is that it's not you listening to them that's the important. It's them listening to you, and you get banks of data, and you know you're sending 1 watt. You know it is, and all the data will tell you what they're receiving. People that are receiving it. That's where that's specifically more useful, especially for propagation reporting and for hearing. Because if you run it for long enough, you'll be able to pick up quite a lot of trends. As I say, with the noise that I've got here and the limitations I've got with my antenna at the moment, which I am going to try and mitigate, but with the limitations I've got, I know that people struggle to hear me. But if I can be heard in South America on 1 watt using Whisper, then it gives me a better idea on how my station is working. As I say, within the established stations, and most of you will have much more established stations than me, with an established station, you will have that idea, but you will have built up that knowledge over time. I haven't got that. I haven't had that time. I've literally been doing this for 4 months, and I've learned so much in 4 months. So there's, I think, Whisper especially, and as I say, those instant spot reports, those are much more useful as to understanding that propagation.
Can I make one more comment? just on what Carson was saying, I agree with what you're saying, Stephen. It's absolutely right. And I think, yeah, Whisper, the fact that most people do use low power. I mean, there's no incentive for an Italian station to use a 1 kilowatt, is it? They don't get a QSL card or anything. Yeah, just on the like the point Carson was making, where you get these sort of freak spots. I mean, the RBN does do FT8 searches, and I'm just wondering if you can not maybe use the RBN directly, but if you use the band, put that into the band map in N1MM, say, and then that sort of maybe, only gives you a spot if you get 3 hits or something like that. I wonder if that could be a solution there.
I think a Whisper in that respect is obviously good, because it's got the 2 minute or whatever it was, so a longer period of time, so that if it's there for 2 minutes, then there is propagation. The 15 seconds of which you don't need the full period to decode it is going to happen much more often.
Stephen, is your plan, bearing in mind your comment about not being on for that long, is there your plan to create some kind of statistical evidence over a period of time?
Well, the evidence that I've got so far is literally what you're saying. This is evidence that I've had over the last 3 months.
Yeah.
And that's valuable. That's valuable. It's valuable for me to know how difficult it is for local stations to hear me on 10. And we've talked about this during the net anyway, the 10 meter net on Sunday. We've talked about this, and now it can be quite difficult to be heard on 10 locally, and it really is just line of sight. But any bit further than that, and I can't be here. The French can't hear me, or I can't hear the French. I can't hear anything of German. If I wanted a special station on 10, I can't do that at the moment. Not with the current setup, and that might be the way the Magitena, because my Magitena is horizontal and not vertical.
You're in the skip zone, Stephen.
Pardon?
You're in the skip zone. It's
Sorry.
too close.
I accidentally went to a French station on 10 once.
But that could be sporadic. I mean, we're coming into the season. But normal.
Yeah, exactly. Just wait a month and you'll be working Germany on 10 meters more often.
Well, exactly. This is the other thing. I mean, coming to sporadic, I know that I haven't really experienced that yet. And most of the stuff I'm experiencing, this is, but again, with improvements not only to the conditions, but also to my own setup here, I know that that's going to make a difference.
So, is there any software or websites or web services that can aggregate long-term data and allow you to build a long-term picture?
The great thing about Grid Tracker is Grid Tracker will do it all for you, and that's one of its biggest benefits. You can have longer term. I tend to have quite short indications. It'll show all your QSOs. It'll show all of those contacts. With Whisper, there are specific Whisper websites which will aggregate your data, and you can get. As I say, you can be virtually a spreadsheet of all of the people that have heard your particular transmission, because you are reporting. They are reporting to the internet. They're not reporting to you. They're reporting to the internet. So there are some specific Whisper. I think there's a forum you can go and you can find them all through there. Cause there's lots of different ones, and as I say, they'll do the graphics, the maps as well.
And can any of them sort of show change over time, so you can see what you were contacting in January, where you could be heard in March, where you could be heard in June, and so on through the year, so you can see how it changes through the course of a year or through the course of a sunspot cycle even? That,
I think, is a limitation. I've seen this when it comes to PSK Reporter and some of the Whisper stuff. They only like shorter periods, so it's the kind of data that you'd have to build up yourself. And that's
there is a side. Hold on, where is?
Oh, Carson's knows something I don't. Fantastic. I don't profess to be an expert at this. I just think that any information is really useful. Please, Carsten, please.
So this is just a limited data set, of course, but it's over a couple of years. So voacap.com, that's by a Finnish guy who adapts the propagation tool that they use for broadcast. That's freeware as well, so that does a calculation based on a model ionosphere. You put in your power and antenna, and it calculates the propagation. But he's got this page there as well.
I'll have a look at that.
Yeah. And there's something else as well, I think, which I use certainly for contests, is Clublog have got a the aggregation where you can look up, say, a band condition to, say, the US under between this and that sunspot number, and I think also the level of the K index as well, and you can say, right, over the last 12 months or whatever, you know, what's the over a 24-hour period on average, you know, what's the QSO rate, you know, between England and America or whatever, and that is quite
That's
useful.
based on real QSOs.
Based on real QSOs, yeah.
That's useful.
Yeah. So you can do that for yourself.
Yeah. Any more questions or comments?
Anything you want to say, John?
Just got one little comment for you. In Grid Tracker, you said about people that you can hear, but you're not sure if they can hear you.
Yeah.
There is a way around that in Grid Tracker. If you open up your call roster, then right-click on the call roster, you can click on Spot and basically put a tick in there. Then a new column will appear, and people that can hear you, that you can hear, it will actually give you how long ago they heard you and what sort of signal strength they're hearing you at.
That's good.
It doesn't count for QSO, but the information's there so you know who you can call.
I don't think QSOs are the most important thing in these modes. I really don't. I mean, I'm just playing it for data. As I said, the QSOs are a bonus to me.
Yeah.
I'm just playing it to learn.
Apart from the ranking and the HF ladder, of course.
Do you know, to be perfectly honest, I knew nothing about the HF ladder. And I joined Clublog, and I've been let into the HF ladder, but I knew nothing about it. Really, I knew absolutely nothing about it until someone pointed out that Pete was top of the league and that I was fighting with John for second place. I knew nothing about it, quite genuinely. Originally, it wasn't. I still don't think that's important because I don't expect to win. I don't expect to be anywhere close to Pete anyway. I don't expect the rest to be perfectly honest. I'm really only playing this for data. I don't think. Well,
Where do you buy your rubber stamps?
what for?
Your QSOs. More seriously, on the subject of PSK and RTTY, I do quite a bit of them, so I'll help get you started, and you'll find it's dead easy.
Well, thanks. As I say, I've got FL Digi and I've got FL Rig on me already on here. I've got them on my laptop now as well. So it's all stuff I'm interested in. I've got FL Digi to work on decoding Morse. And when Evan was doing a bit of Morse on the net a few weeks ago, I actually heard him. I tried transmitting with it as well, but I haven't quite sussed that out yet.
Yeah, it's easy when you know.
Trying to figure that
Good.
Can I just make one quick comment just on, you mentioned PSK and RTTY. This is what I'm a little bit angry about in terms of the classification of digital modes. I mean, these weak signal modes are sort of lumped in with PSK and RTTY, which is sort of the signal to noise performance is sort of -13, which is, or thereabouts, or certainly for PSK, worse for RTTY. But they're sort of lumped into with FT8 and FT4, and what that's meant is that it's a bit unfair in a way, but it's also meant that people think, well, I don't need to do PSK or RTTY anymore to get the XCC or whatever, and it's really just really hit them hard. It really hit PSK and RTTY hard in terms of activity.
Thing is, it's all one grey area, Evan, because you've got RTTY that needs a really good reception. PSK, which, like you say, will work maybe down to -13.
Yeah.
Then you've got Olivia, which has got quite a lot of forward error correction and is sort of halfway between PSK and your Frank Taylor modes. So
it is a little bit that way.
There's nowhere nice and tight. There's no knee on the curve where you can draw, where you can put a line and say that's one digital mode, that's another.
But even Olivia, I don't think comes anywhere near the performance of these things.
Well, no.
Olivia might sort of go down to sort of -15, 16, something like that.
Well, no, because FT8 and FT4's, sorry, FT8 and FT4 is -24, I think it is.
Well,
See, that's a different.
Well, yeah. So FT8 takes 30 seconds. The forward error correction on a Olivia signal gives it a latency of maybe 6 seconds. So there's your difference. Sorry, not 30 seconds, it's 15 seconds on FT8, isn't it? But, you know, there's your difference.
Yeah. There's still,
But notably, the difference between FT8 and Whisper, did you say it's a whole minute to transmit on Whisper?
Takes 2 minutes to transmit on Whisper, and it's instead of -24 of FT8, it's -28.
Yeah.
4 dBs. It's not, you know, it's cost you 1 3/4 minutes, and you've got an extra 4 dBs. There's a
4 times the time, so 4 times the. Well, what's
4
it?
dB,
No,
that's 6
4
times.
dB, 6.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think it's where you're probably starting to hit a hard limit, isn't it?
well, to put it into perspective, real perspective, for slow propagation, these are LoRa modules. And this is something I'll probably talk about sometime point in the future. LoRa it's got a noise floor of I think it's 140 dB.
You can't
I mean, it's crazy what these will do compared to FT8 and FT4 and to Whisper. 104, I think it's 140 dB. It's a lot that you can actually listen to. Really, really weak signal propagation.
Is that across the 2500 hertz bandwidth?
I think so.
Right. Yeah.
I'm surprised you can get that by disconnecting a transistor and putting it in the freezer unpowered.
Isn't that the noise floor? Because that's
I think it is. Yeah, I think it's stupidly low with these things.
but that's
really
what
low.
your receiver noise floor is. That's what your radio has as well. That you do
But
FT8 with.
these particular things, these transmit like 1/4 of a watt. There's nothing. But the range on them is phenomenal.
There you go.
Any other points?
Not from me.
Salter beams used to do the WSPR light for checking your antenna. But what's it designed? Richard Newseed.
Did you pick that up, Stephen?
Just about.
Yeah.
I don't know how to do them now or not because they're not listed on the site.
No, I think they ran out after a period of time, didn't they?
Yeah.
I know it was only a limited production.
Yeah.
But certainly they brought the interest as far as Whisper is concerned by actually producing a module for it, you know, where you could attach it to, and of course it reported it through PSK Reporter. But we are going back a few years.
It's been that, yeah.
Oh yeah.
And I just add something to something that Evan said earlier about it been almost unfair to have FT8 and FT4 in it's a digital classification.
It is on.
Arguably, you're right, because comparatively, they're easy. They are easy. The software is easy to interpret and use. There's no, it's all there for you. But as far as classifying it, whether it needs its own specific classification as weak digital or whatever, that's for the amateur world to decide. That's for,
Oh, they've made the mistake. I think.
Magazine and various people like that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I think when they made the decision, when these things came out, it was the performance. I think just was almost not believable. Whether this was 2017, this is coming out, and I think the fact. I mean, again, I come back to the fact that even with I guess Olivia stuff like that, you're still needing normal skip. Whereas at moderate power, you are getting the scatter. You can use scatter, and that's why you can work 6 meters, even though on CW that you wouldn't have a hope in hell, even with a high power. That I think is the difference, and I've never really seen it admitted that way, and that sort of has annoyed me as well. Is that people just say, "Oh, he did something on FT8," and as if it was done on PSK. And I think, well, hang on, that's not really fair.
But I think there's a line to be drawn between fairness and being jealous, and I think there's a certain amount of jealousy that you can't do that with these other modes, and that's not to say that these other modes aren't valid.
Yeah, I suppose most of the XCC wise, most of digital country hunting, entity hunting was done in Ritity anyway. So Olivia and PSK was like, yeah, it exists, but nobody really does it under the expedition. That was Ritity, and then now you can do FT8, and FT8 is done by the expeditions as well. I think that is what's annoying people who have 280 or 312 or whatever countries on Ritity and are scraping to try to get the last 20 to get the full hours. And now, yeah, everybody can do it.
Yeah, you're absolutely spot on, Carson. I've got 91 DXCC countries for digital modes, and it's absolutely right. Something I will also add is, as I say, you can only do one QSO at a time. There is software which will do multiple QSOs, and I've seen that Russian expedition that went to the Uganda. They were using multiple audio bands at the same time, so they could squeeze in as many. Yeah.
Yeah, and MSHB, which you didn't mention, which is the third, or well, there's more, but one of the other softwares, they have a
That's the one.
multi-answering SP, I don't know, sequencing protocol. No idea what the abbreviation stands for.
Yeah, that's the one. That's the specific one that Russian station was using. I couldn't remember the name of it, but I remember that they were using it.
And you remember you were talking about WSJTX and having to have manual intervention to start a new QSO, or even to start calling CQ again, for that matter. Yeah. It's very plainly and bluntly put in the license agreement for the software, which is open source, that you can modify the software if you like, under the open source license agreement, but you cannot make it do that. That would be a breach of the source code license. And I suspect the second one, JTDX, is probably using the same source code, so it's in the same boat. But perhaps the third software has been written more or less from scratch, and therefore they can do what they want.
I don't know about that. But
they all use the decoding algorithms from Taylor. It's the user interface and the Interaction, user interaction, that's different.
Yeah, I don't think the decoding algorithms are. Well, you can write the software for them. The algorithms aren't on that same license agreement. The algorithms are something different, but the license for the software itself is where it says you can't use our source code to do this.
Yeah.
There's only one thing though. There's only one thing though, and this is the tiny little thing. Where's the fun?
Oh yeah.
Where's the fun of going after a station? I mean,
Exactly.
if it was like that and it was automatic, I would have zero interest in this. Zero.
You could still use it for your propagation reporting, but
true, and that would be the only use.
Yeah.
That would literally be the only use then.
Exactly.
And then because it was automatic, people would turn around and say, well, it's not a valid mode for anything to do with the amateur world, so we're not going to have awards for it. I think the fact that there's manual intervention, human interaction with it, that's what makes it interesting.
I thought that's a requirement anyway for the QSO. I think.
I don't know, but it's a requirement of the software license.
Yeah.
Although
I've
been
always
broken, like WSJTZ, for example, you can do fully automatic.
But I haven't got that.
No, I haven't, but yeah, I know it's there. I have no use for it.
For the copyright holder of the source code, which is how expensive it is to enforce the license agreement that you've issued.
Yeah.
But that's just it's just the basis thing.
Yeah.
I mean, if there are quite genuinely, if there are people who have language issues and they can't speak, then this is a good bird for them. But as is Ritty, as is Morse, as is PSK. So there are modes for that. There's no point, 0 point, in my opinion, in having something that's just automatic. Oh, I had a QSO the other day with New York. Were you there? No, I was doing something. I was doing the garden or something like that. Pointless.
Did I?
That's like bragging that you're about to dunk some biscuits that you're going to buy next week from Morrison's. Seriously, it's pointless.
I agree with you entirely, Stephen, but I'm certain people out there that do that.
No,
in fact, I think I've read about them read them saying so on the internet. You know, my station worked, not I worked. My station worked. So and so something.
I've got a question for you, Steve, that Evan won't ask. Have you tried it on 11 metres?
Two wrongs don't make a right.
No, I haven't tried it on 11 metres.
I'm glad you
tried it. Neither have I tried it on 60 because my licence doesn't allow that.
Indeed. I see Ian's joined us. I just wondered if he's in Holland. I see he's muted at the moment, but I just wondered if give him a few seconds if he wants to make any comments.
Yes, that was the other thing. While Ian has appeared. Hello, Ian. Nice to see you.
Yeah, hello.
Yeah, being an exponent of the FT8 and FT4 and the digital side of things, I just wondered if there was any comments you perhaps want to make to Stephen.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of other variables. You can't just use your PSK reporter as a general observation. Obviously, there's the atmospheric conditions, grey line as well. You know, I saw the map, but it didn't have the grey line overlaid. I think if you look at that and you overlaid the grey line, there's usually a box you can tick and it'll put it on. Certainly that can give you a bit of an idea where your propagation is going against the grey line.
I didn't really include that on some of the maps now, but I have done that. And it's interesting to see how it changes from east to west during the day. There are some exceptions, but in general, there is a point in the morning where I can't hear anything from America. It's all literally coming from Asia. And this is mostly also to do with the time of the day. But there's a point in the evening where it's mostly all America. And you can't hear anything. And it's reasonable in the evening. It's not, let's say 8 o'clock. and I'm certain some bands I can't hear anything in Europe. So it's a valid point, but I do use that. That's actually quite an interesting thing to do, to watch the grey line and watch the propagation as it changes with the grey line.
Also, try to optimise the performance of your station. Use the reporting software and put a schedule on, so you're swapping bands, so you can try and maximise the operation of your station.
Yeah, there is that as well. I had noticed, if I remember right, looking at your particular was it 400? About 400. I think you've even beaten John and myself into second place. When it comes to that's if you combine both of your values when it comes to data mode. So I know you've done a lot better than the both of us. Then again, you also have the benefit of that different location.
Yeah.
Do you find any differences in location, Ian?
Yeah, because obviously Manchester's an urban environment. Where I'm in Holland, it's a province area, so there's quite a lot of agricultural land around. The only noise in my QTH, there's a lot of man-made electrical noise. That's the problem, and the houses nearby have a lot of solar panels. But in Manchester, I'm restricted. I've just got a small garden.
How strong are the Italian signals in Holland?
They're quite strong. It's not much difference in the UK.
They're strong on Mars, I think.
I was going to say though, there's another feature to the grey line, and FT8 and automatic receiving stations negate this one a bit, but you'll only get propagation to parts of the world where people are awake. If everything's turned off, nothing receiving, you'll never get that QSO.
And you've got to remember,
that's one of the things I said. I mean, not everyone's listening.
Yeah. You've got to remember with the grey line, I think it's a bit. There's always been this debate about it. I think it's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, is that people who know they're on the grey line will switch on and point their beams along that path. But this is one thing I think would be really interesting to test, is that certainly using the the beacons, the Northern California DX beacons. They've got one in Venezuela, one in Finland, and blah blah, and all CW. But is actually not using adcock arrays or something like that, knowing the direction that the signals are actually coming from. It's assumed, I think, that some of these signals are coming along the grey line, long path or short path, and I'm not sure if that's true necessarily. And what's the guy's name? Karl Lutzelschwab, it's German name. Guy in America, K9LA, I think his call is. But he thinks grey line's a load of rubbish. I mean, I think the thing is, one reason why it may be going through the grey line, certainly for stuff like 80 metres very low, is that it crosses the equator at where the MUF is, or the ionisation is at its very lowest. So it may be just before sunrise at the equator. Because if you look at a chart of ionosphere data, even at night the equatorial area is still highly ionised, which is not good for a very low frequency, 80 metres or 160 or whatever. But Karl Schwab just thinks, well, the main thing you need is a dark path. But it'd be good to know where these signals are actually coming from. And they use the adcock arrays during the war to find out where you're transmitting from. You hear the Morse and you see the spike on a particular heading. But it'd be good to find that out for sure. It's still in theory. We still don't know.
And it is good to test these rules, because with the recent conditions on HF being pretty rubbish due to all the sunspot activity, and yet I've heard stations thousands of miles away usually say the conditions today are rubbish. I'm thinking, they're not bad. And You know, it's partly everybody thinks they're rubbish, so they're not bothering to try.
You know, it's funny you say that because it is a quick question for John. Did you manage to get that Hawaiian station that appeared yesterday for about 20 minutes?
Hawaiian station. Do you have the call sign?
No, I don't have it off the top of my head, but there was a Hawaiian station that appeared literally for 20 minutes yesterday, and it must have disappeared very quickly. That must have been sporadic. Yeah, I don't think that was normal propagation.
That could just be that grey line because
Could be.
because there's only a, I don't know which band is on, but there's only a limited time where there's light or dark on all the path. Especially
That could be.
things.
You might get some
Valid
help
point,
there as well.
Any more questions or comments, please?
I think we've just about worked all the way through them, and I think Evan's run out. He's got a great big long piece of paper here, like, and he's slowly ticking them off.
Well,
And the one at the bottom says no 11 meters, like, you know.
Absolutely right.
I would say that, considering this has been a talk about plastic radio, it's been one of the most active discussions we've had in a while.
I absolutely agree. It's been brilliant. I really enjoyed it as a, not from the presenting point of view. These questions have been brilliant because I don't pretend to know everything. I get an idea of things from a scientific point of view, but I don't pretend to know everything there is about this hobby. And even I've learned something in the last hour that we've had questions for.
Right, well, perhaps we should leave maybe not quite the last word, but maybe one of the last words to Genghis Khan, who's listening quietly.
Well,
come on,
I
Tom.
have to admit I'm not into these modes like FT4 and FT8 and the Whisper and stuff like that. But years ago, when I started in amateur radio, PSK 31 was all the rage. And I used to work all sorts of long distances, actually, with low power on that until I finally burnt out the output on the transmitter I was using. But and after that, I gave up on it and moved off to start to do contesting and stuff like that, and SSB and CW as well. And basically, but listening to what you've been saying there, in fact, it's perfectly valid actually for amateur, from the point of view of amateur radio. When I started in amateur radio, actually, I once, in front of a very eminent contester, opened my mouth and said I was working on PSK 31, and he lowered his glasses and said, "But that's not really amateur radio," you know. And basically, if he's still alive actually and still around, but basically what I'm saying is that the new modes are perfectly valid, and I've been fascinated to hear what you've all been saying about them. Just sitting here listening, actually. Yes.
That was Clive, wasn't it, Tom?
It was Clive. That's right. That's not. That was what he said. That's not amateur radio.
The dark side.
I can remember him reducing me to about the size of a threepenny bit. You know.
And you know who's on FT8 all the time?
I know. He then went on to it himself, actually, and I knew he was bragging about it because I was listening to him one day and he was bragging about it, and I thought to myself, he's a lying old hypocrite. You know.
You must return the comment to him one day.
Yeah, but it just goes to show, actually, as the years go by, things change, and the whole perception of amateur radio changes, and we have to move along with that. Gardens are getting smaller. It's not so easy to put up long wire antennas anymore around your house. Neighbors moan, you know, all this stuff. Your neighbors complain about interference and all that. So good luck to it. I enjoy listening to that talk. It was really good. Thank you very much, Steve.
You're more than welcome, Tom. Thank you very much. Well, on that brief subject there, my neighbours still don't know we do amateur radio.
Right.
Carson, can I ask you, because you obviously use QO100 a lot. Do you use FT8 and FT4 through QO100?
I don't know, because I would have to set up some software to get the audio from one application to the other, and that doesn't like my Flex Radio audio driver, so I've got some issues with that. And yeah, I can do sideband perfectly fine over QL100, so I don't really need FT8
Yet.
That's
Is it
actually
case
the
of-
only band, so to speak, where I do sideband. So
Fair enough. All right. Okay. Right. Well,
Thank you. Can I just say thank you very much for listening to this really engaging talk.
Yeah,
And,
very
I'll
good.
see you all down the log. So
well, you said you set it up for an hour, and I think we've gone for about an hour and a half now.
We have, yeah, yeah.
So, I think, from everybody here, I think that was very impressive as far as the talk is concerned, and very interesting in terms of the questions and answers afterwards, because it's certainly a subject that quite clearly you've gone into it a big way, and we I think it's probably one that can we do with a regular update, because obviously times change, conditions change. It would be interesting perhaps to have another update after the sporadic E season and see where we go from there. Yeah. So I think from everybody here and everybody at home, thank you, Stephen. Well, I'm sure we'll all give you a big clap if you can hear it.
thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you for not being too cruel with the questions, Evan.